Hello. It is afternoon where I am, but it may be morning or evening, depending on when you tune in. And I wish you a good morning or a good evening. My name is Stacey Sanderson, and I am a psychotherapist and author, and really just feel called to offer my perspective on certain aspects of relationship psychology, the human experience, and most definitely my thoughts about narcissism as someone who has been on the front lines helping clients recover from narcissistic abuse for over 2 decades now. And one of the things that I find helpful is to clarify some of the diagnostic information. And I think it's generally helpful in our relationships not to diagnose people, but to observe patterns in their behavior and, more importantly, in how we respond. And I'm also trying to tie together themes of what I'm posting on social media, Instagram, Facebook, with what I'm talking about here on YouTube. And I really like the idea of YouTube postings because it feels to me a little bit more connected than a podcast. You can still listen only to audio if you need to, but I think it allows for a little bit more interactivity in terms of your ability to like, share, and comment. And be a part of the discussion. That's what I would ideally have going on here. So, when researching narcissistic personality disorder, one of the characteristics, I don't know that I would call it a trait, but one of the motivating factors for a narcissist behavior is that of social dominance. So I need to clarify that I am not talking about global social dominance or cultural social dominance or nationalism or colonialism or, for now, even patriarchy. We could go down that path, but for now, what I'm referring to is interpersonal social dominance. So the need someone has to feel superior in relationship or even in conversation with you. So this is not a technical identifier as a symptom of narcissistic personality disorder. Why it isn't, I'm not sure. It does perhaps encompass things like grandiosity and entitlement, but it doesn't have to. But it is this overt or covert way that people do their best to assert a sense of dominance. And anecdotally, I would say that this happens equally with men and women. And in fact, I would say I have seen this more with women. That being said, I have encountered more female than male narcissists like in my personal life, but I think that understanding their need for social dominance can be a helpful way of knowing how to take care of yourself, how to have boundaries, how to navigate around it if you need to. And being a bit tongue in cheek, I think that my favorite form of social dominance is what I've called the social interview. As I get older, this is happening less and less, thank goodness. Although we have evolved from, are your kids reading yet, from, when my kids were in kindergarten, to have your kids bought a house yet? So it's the evolution of the social interview, if you will. But what's happening with someone who's highly narcissistic is they're evaluating your status. They are essentially trying to figure out, can they get something from you? And if not, are you a threat? Not consciously. Sometimes it might be conscious, and perhaps not transparently, although sometimes it might be transparent. I have had this happen so many times, and it's just really interesting and compelling to me. And if I'm grounded and being authentic, I can be graceful and go along with it. If I am not grounded, my protector parts, my inner pit bull comes out, and I kind of throw the gauntlet down. It really depends on the situation. And as I get older, I am learning to protect myself, protect my energy, and not step into the ring with them. Other ways that they do this are by competing with you. So this would be particularly true in a workplace, but this could also be in a volunteer situation, a church situation, family. This 100% happens within families. Um, it can be within a friend situation. Um, I think that this happens a lot. I don't think I know. This happens a lot in volunteer and church organizations where there aren't the more formal mechanisms of how people might conduct themselves, and there aren't more formal mechanisms of accountability. So I have seen it in those situations, and I've definitely heard about it. And this can also show up, of course, in intimate partnerships, of course. And I could probably have a separate talk about that in and of itself. But I have heard this from spouses who have narcissistic partners for years, that it feels like they're competing with them, that it feels like they can't share their successes in life or their creative achievement or what they're excited about. It shows up as passive aggressiveness or non-participation. It shows up in persistent patterns of being competitive. It shows up in patterns of I'm the favored parent. I'm the favorite parent. It shows up in someone's competitiveness with a sibling. So it is this need to be kind of the king of the castle, if you will, or the queen of the castle. But it probably causes more strife than many other aspects of the condition and of the narcissistic dynamic. Over time, in an intimate partnership, the non-narcissistic partner will start dulling their shine, will stop sharing their achievements. They may even sabotage. I forgot about that one. Sometimes sabotage is a way someone shows social dominance. More generally, this can show up as someone needing to be the center of attention, which happens anyway. Um, It is rooted in what, according to the research, is the impetus for bullying in childhood. Sorry, I should have clarified that. So there are early indicators of narcissism in childhood in bullying dynamics. So bullying is thought to be a fairly basic form of social dominance. And despite the cliches around bullying, often people who are bullied have something about them, an attribute, a gift, a sensitivity, a knowing that gets under the skin of the bully and reminds them of their insufficiency in some way. So they attack. social dominance almost always involves recruiting others into the abusive behavior, both in childhood and in adulthood. And as we all know, there are still bullies in adulthood. I had a scenario where I used to work where there was a woman whose entire modus operandi was around social dominance into any room she walked. And it played out as comparing, competing, laughing at people. There was a dynamic of kind of figuring out what people's pain points were and then manipulating that, throwing that back in the first person's face. This included a lot of humble bragging. It was exhausting to be around. And this person to me seemed vile and kind of ugly, maybe physically a little bit, but certainly in terms of the way that they relate to people. And it gets tiresome, right? So I mean this can create suffering, but mostly these are people who are insufferable, right? Um, these are not people who are happy by nature, connected to joy, who have inner peace. They may seem temporarily like they've achieved some type of triumph, but it's short lasting, it's short acting. These are people who may have a small circle of sycophantic followers, but not real friends, not real people in their corner. They tend to be quite lonely and isolated no matter what their social media accounts say. Social media is another place where people seek social dominance. In my generation, this is quieting down, thank God. But it very much is how many likes, how many followers. They're looking for a lot of outside approval. So part of that social dominance is that they farm out their sense of self-esteem, right? To quote my coach, their sense of self-esteem is completely externally referenced. Isn't that a great way of putting it? But they feed off of other people's attention and accolades, and they really need it. And if that's not enough, they will get that by putting other people down. You can think of it as a bit of a compliment if someone targets you like this, as gross as it is, because you know that they've threatened you in some way. So I mean, you can bring your ego to the party if you need to. I don't recommend that you do. Sometimes it's hard for us not to, right? Um, I was thinking about the incident on the weekend, although I don't follow golf, about, the some of the American audience attacking Northern Irish golfer Rory McIlroy and his partner. That's a form of social dominance, right? Low blow, low vibrational behavior. To which I say, underestimate someone from Northern Ireland. That'll be fun. Um, but what's helpful if you're in what is the word I'm looking for? If you're needing to witness or experience this dynamic in some way or this behavior, what you first want to do is get some distance from it. You want to observe it. So, a big part of narcissistic wounding intergenerationally is someone needing to feel better than to feel good enough. And so, this happens with people who have high narcissistic traits, and this happens to adult children of narcissists as well, because that's been the messaging. So, that's an important thing to keep in mind. You are not now, not ever, responsible for feeding someone's ego. Only we as individuals can tend to our need for ego equanimity or narcissistic supply, if you will. When we talk about social dominance, we are talking about patterns of power. We give our power away if we play along, Move into competition with them. Don't drop down into that same level of vibration. So again, pull back, observe, be neutral, be grounded in your own inherent worth. No one has dominion over anyone. People who have a need for social dominance typically also have a need for leadership. You knew I was going to say it, right? So they are sycophantic, which means they suck up to the right people. They are competitive. They know how to play a game very well, the game. They only feel that they're successful in positions of power and authority. I actually refer to this as the Burger King management phenomenon. Not that it could just has to be just Burger King, but it's the status people attribute to the label of manager or CEO or whatever the label is. I just think it's laughable because we all know that in most organizations, it's the people in the other lower tiers who are doing most of that work, and the upper tier people are taking credit for it. There are some examples of of that not being the case, where you have good, solid, conscious leadership, but it's not common. So social dominance represents a level of low consciousness, low vibrational behavior. And again, it plays out interpersonally and systemically, and it plays out globally. I'm not gonna step into that, but I think we all know that we are living in times, not that it's ever changed, of nations having a need for social dominance. It's it's hard not to go down that road, but I just don't want to feed it, at least not today. And so, again, if this is something that you've experienced, quietly observe, go into a neutral place emotionally, seek help or guidance if you need to. If this is playing out as harassment or bullying, keep a detailed time or date stamped log of the behavior, right? Screenshot if there are any text messages, save any emails, um, keep a detailed word for word log of what the negative narrative is. This is behavior that very rarely gets better or resolves on its own. It often gets worse over time. And anyone who's been in an abusive relationship knows exactly what I'm talking about, because it takes more and more bad behavior for the person to get the same limited effect of feeling superior. Yes, there, in case anyone's wondering, there is a connection with social dominance and a superiority complex, although lots of people who have a superiority complex do not seek to be socially dominant in their relationships and interactions. So I hope this has been helpful in some way. I realize these are really short bursts and short blasts of information that can sometimes feel like a Rick Mercer rant. I know for myself, I find this exhausting, um, draining, right? The people, these folks are energy vampires, but you do not have to give your power away by participating. So if this resonates, like, share, subscribe, get in the conversation. You can find out more about my work at www.staceysanderson.ca. I am on Facebook at Stacey Sanderson at Inquire Within. That's also the Instagram handle. And check that all out because I am giving monthly workshops. I have an in-person retreat coming up in November that I'd love to have you join me at, and get to know people. All right. I am going to head out into this absolutely gorgeous September 30th day, and I will just end with an acknowledgement of today being National Truth and Reconciliation Day here in Canada, and noting that I have spent this day contemplating what that means for myself, and I hope that you have done the same. Take good care.